Check this out. I'm going to break down for you the NBA youngboy bond hearing, how it all went down. I'm going to tell you some of the details of his arrest. When you hear this story, it's wild. It's going to go down in hip-hop history as one of the wildest arrests of a rapper ever. Some of the really crazy details about just everything that's going on. All right, let's get right into it. First off, last week, NBA youngboy was arrested in Los Angeles. We know that the report was that, he fled and the canines had to come and sniff him out. So I'm going to tell you what really happened. It's crazy. So check this out. You probably already know he got arrested, federal firearms charges. He got arrested in Cali. The Cali judge set a bond. He had a bond out in Cali, but the government wanted to appeal to the Louisiana judge. The warrant was out of Louisiana. So the Cali judge said, all right, I'm going to give you all a week. Go to the Louisiana judge, see what he says. Now, today, we learned that the Louisiana judge denied the bond. No bond for NBA youngboy pending the charges. In the course of doing that, we got a lot of crazy information, starting with the arrest. Okay, here's how the arrest went down. NBA youngboy is chilling at his mansion in Los Angeles. He opens up his garage door. He pulls out alone, dolo, in his Maybach truck. Little does he know the cops are parked outside and they're ready to arrest him on this warrant from Louisiana for illegal firearms. They don't pull him over immediately. I don't understand the sense of that. Anyway, they follow him a little bit, and eventually after a couple blocks, a black and white police car, a marked police car pulls up behind them, throws his lights on, they light him up, and NBA youngboy does not pull over. He takes that Maybach, that 2021 Maybach, he drives off on these cops. Takes him for a couple blocks. Eventually he does pull over. Okay, so he's pulled over. Now you got the one black and white and a couple other plainclothes officers have also come and surrounded the area. The officers exit their cruiser and they walk up to youngboy's car. One officer on one side, the other officer on the other side. Youngboy is the only guy in this 2021 Maybach. The officers start announcing directions to him and they say, lower your window. He lowers the window. Throw your car keys out the window. He takes his car keys, the fob, whatever it is, throws it out the window. Then they say, take your hands and place them outside the window. This, by the way, is all according to the police report's affidavit. Youngboy might have his own version of event. Another instruction, a police officer says, take your hands and place them outside the window. So he takes his hands, places them outside the window. And then, as the officer, I assume, is about to enter the car, open the door, apprehend his suspect, what does NBA youngboy do? He smashes on the gas pedal and he peels off. Facts. This is what the police affidavit says. He's in his 2021 Maybach. Boom, he's gone. I guess the officers scurry back into their police cruiser. They give chase. He's moving, he's grooving, he gets a little far, and then eventually he pulls over. Not like pulls over for the cops, just kind of swerves, boom, puts the car in he's out, he's running on foot. The cops are pursuing him this whole time, but they're like a little behind. He eventually ducks in and hides somewhere. The cops don't know where he went. They get to the car, they see he's out of the car, he must have ran. What they do is they build a perimeter, they call in the canine unit, and they begin a search for their suspect. Eventually, the canines sniff out Kentrell Golden, NBA youngboy, crouched hiding in a backyard of a property. They arrest him. Crazy. I've never heard an arrest story like that ever. That's certainly the most legendary arrest story I've ever heard for a rapper. We also learned from the details at the hearing some of how NBA youngboy is living right now. He is living in Utah. He bought a house in Utah just before this arrest. He is in a relationship with Star Thigpen. They have kids together. He said, according to his pretrial service report, he pays $5,000 a month in child support. That sounds a little low if you ask me. Now, what happens on his bond hearing? Okay, so they charge him with 2 charges of violation of the federal law. First, he's a felon in possession of a firearm. He has a prior felony conviction, aggravated assault with a weapon. He was convicted. He cannot now have a firearm under the federal laws. They're saying he possessed a firearm. Okay, what's the other charge? The other charge is having illegal stock on a firearm. So, it might have been a silencer or some sort of handle on it. You can't have that unless you register that you've done that you've altered the gun in that way. Unless you register, you can't have that. And so he's also the felon. So 2 charges. These carry significant sentences. Under the federal sentencing guidelines, depending on your criminal history, you're going to get a score. The max sentence on each of these charges is like 10 years. In NBA youngboy's case, given his history, he's probably looking at somewhere between 3 and 5. 3 and big time, lots of years. Okay. What does the California judge say about him getting a bond? Remember, a bond is so important. If you get a bond, you can fight the charges while you're outside and free. And so you can fight. It's worth fighting. If you don't get a bond, is it even worth fighting? I mean, chances are the government comes to you with a deal where you might do 2 years, 3 years. You know how long you spend fighting a trial? It could take 1, 2, maybe even 3 years. So that's why the bond is so important. What does the California judge say? California judge gives them the bond. She says, yo, it's not that serious. Apparently to her, this guy can put some restrictions on him. Let's get some cash bail on him. He puts up $500,000 in cash. Let's have him pledge some houses. Let's have him be restricted from not having any firearms. She sets bail. Boom, boom, boom. But the government says, no, we're going to go to Louisiana. We got to get the judge in Louisiana to see about this. We have the right to do that because this warrant is out of Louisiana. Fast forward to this week, the Louisiana judge says no bond. Okay, why did the Louisiana judge say no bond? If you ask for my opinion, it came down to 2 things. First, Louisiana is way different than California. It's harder to be a criminal defendant in Louisiana. You're going to have a much better shot in California. And 2, this is my opinion, NBA YoungBoy's lawyers dropped the ball, period. Point blank, period. They made some weak arguments, and they didn't even really make extensive arguments. In this case, the government had extensive papers, and the defense did not really put in anything. Now, I understand what the defendants were thinking, but in my opinion, they were a little overconfident. Let me tell you how they went. So first, they started by saying, look, a Cali judge already looked at this, so, you should do what the Cali judge said. The Cali judge, when she looked at it, the government had all this information. They knew about him running. They knew about his arrest history. Yeah, but a judge in Louisiana can easily look at that and say, yeah, but the government now has all this information better presented to me. And the judge in Cali didn't necessarily get a close look and a really up-close, detailed presentation. So that argument, while it is legally strong and sound, it can very easily be undercut depending on how someone looks at it. And so you can't rely on it so confidently. You must be aggressive and put everything you can. That was one argument they made. The other argument they made, and this was a fatally flawed argument, again, in my opinion, they said, look, he was arrested in Louisiana a couple months ago on these charges. The Louisiana state prosecutor doesn't think he's so dangerous, doesn't think he's such a flight risk. They've had him out, free, no conditions. So you should do the same thing now that the federal government is picking up the charges. It's the same case, it's the same conduct, it's the same person. That's the dumbest argument I ever heard. Listen, whether a defendant is going to run or do something crazy while out on bail on state charges is totally different from the question of whether a defendant is going to run or do something crazy when out on federal charges. Federal charges carry with them much greater penalties, much greater risk, much greater stress. And so the idea that the horrible argument. So if you ask me why you didn't get a bond, you didn't get a bond because you were in Louisiana and your lawyers didn't do the best job. And they lost that bond, and what the court looked at ultimately and they said is, look, there's a long history of violent crimes with this kid. He doesn't listen to, instructions. In fact, the last time when he was on probation, there was a series of drug tests that he was supposed to take. There was drug counseling he was supposed to do. He never showed up. He never did it. He's had other probation violations. This kid is too much of a troublemaker. There's no set of conditions that I could give him a bond. He's not getting a bond. Now, if you ask me, that's wild, because this kid was charged in this case for holding handguns in a music video. Okay, if you go to my Instagram @LawyerForWorkers, you can see the pictures. They basically came to a music video shoot, okay, and they arrest a bunch of kids at the shoot, okay. They confiscate all these guns from the shoot, okay, and then they also confiscate the video footage that was taken. And from there, what they do is they say, oh, on the video, this kid is holding this gun, and this is the gun we confiscated. These are the same guns. This is a real gun, and he was holding it. We're going to charge him. That's a pretty solid case. They took DNA also. According to the police file, they have DNA swabs from people on who was touching what. So that's a pretty solid case. But what are we talking about here? We're talking about a kid putting his hand on a gun in a music video. We're talking about NBA YoungBoy using a gun for the purpose of a music video. It's not possessing a handgun in the classic sense. This is arguably artistic expression. This is arguably a kid on a business premises. There's a video shoot. Okay, and look, this is how the system goes, right? Look at the police report. What happened at that scene? The cops found X amount of guns, X amount of people. And then they asked all those people whose guns are whose. Well, here's what didn't happen. Every gun was not accounted for by a person. Instead, there were a couple people who said, these are my guns. And there were a lot of guns that left unaccounted for. And you know what happens when that happens? Cops can put it on somebody or everybody. If no one claims it, everyone's getting it. If I had to guess, NBA YoungBoy had no idea that holding a gun in a music video could lead to this type of situation. This is a very serious situation. I definitely am predicting that he's going to have to face some time. You got to understand how this works. So NBA YoungBoy was arrested and charged by state prosecutors, and those state prosecutors could have made the case that you can't have this gun on you, but the feds took over that case. You know why the feds take over cases from state prosecutors? Because they want to charge people and they want to get them convicted. That's what the feds do. They're not in the business of kind of thumbing around, dicking around. They're serious. They're serious people. They're into serious business. If they take that charge over from the state, you can best believe that they're expecting a conviction. What's the motivation here behind the federal government's charges? I'll tell you, it's very simple what this motivation is. It's like if you were working the checkout counter at a grocery store. And when you're working the checkout counter at the grocery store, it can be very boring from day to day. But every once in a while, you might have a celebrity come into your checkout lane. And then it gets a little interesting. You might text your friend and say, oh my God, you'll never believe, but I had Usher in my checkout lane. Or, I was there and it was a boring day. And then boom, in came Snoop Dogg. So, never underestimate that a lot of these prosecutions, a lot of these arrests, a lot of these charges are motivated by the fact that there are human beings who have discretion, the option, the choice of who to go after. And they look at a kid like NBA YoungBoy and they say, that's a big fish. That's somebody I'd like to go after. I'd like to stick him up on my wall. And so when you're like NBA YoungBoy, you're at the top of the rap game, you are fighting these unbelievably conflicting forces where that gangster rap, that gangster lifestyle is fueling your come up, is fueling your buzz. And at the same time is bringing these cops out and is having them look at you like lunch, right? Look at you like a big target on your back. Really tough situation for NBA YoungBoy, a kid whose father is locked up and incarcerated, a kid who comes from the streets, a kid who has arguably, in my opinion, done a lot to get his life right, okay? Yeah, he got into that situation where right after signing a major record label, he got into a shootout. He was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, suspended 10-year probation sentence. And since then, there have been a series of incidents. But you do definitely see, I think you can make the case, a very, very strong defensible case that this is a kid who's been getting his life together, getting his life turned. You know what? It's not so simple. My first inclination when I heard this story was, this is probably prosecutors going after some kid who's gotten too big. Well, here's NBA YoungBoy, super independent, really doesn't give a F, does whatever he wants, constantly getting in trouble. So likely, what is this? This is like, when you're a grocery store clerk at the checkout line, every day can be pretty boring. But if one day a celebrity walks into your checkout line, it'd be exciting. You start calling people, texting people. It's just a prosecutor kind of trying to gun for that number one rapper, somebody who's a trophy for that prosecutor. Actually, though, I don't think that's what this is. Actually, this is state prosecutors who arrested a bunch of kids who tried, and typically, this is the Baton Rouge Police Department Street Crimes Division. And if you look at these police reports, there's a lot of stuff in there where they're noting people's tattoos, noting what gangs they claim, noting what bandanas were found as evidence. When something like that happens and you don't get a gang charge, and instead individual members start getting charged, what are the cops doing? Cops are doing something very simple. They're charging whoever they can with whatever they can as hard as they can to get people to snitch. In my opinion, NBA YoungBoy is not Tekashi 6ix9ine. And these prosecutors in Baton Rouge, Louisiana are probably going to find themselves with a kid who's going to stand tall and serve a little time. And he'll come out bigger and buzzier than ever. Free top till it's backwards.